Josh, so let folks know a little bit about you, and then I have a big question to ask you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm a fractional CMO. I've been doing that for about the past year. I wind up working a lot in B2B SaaS because I have a strong background there. But I'm really passionate also about SMBs. So I'm trying to find ways to get more involved in some smaller businesses.
Okay, excellent, good idea, by the way. All
Yeah.
right, so you're talking to a lot of companies, you're working with a lot of companies, right? Uh, what are some of the bigger shifts you're seeing in sort of companies or clients' marketing strategies as we sort of move through 2025? Like, what's moving around
Yeah.
on the priorities?
It's incredible how fast I had to become an AI expert.
Yeah.
And so much of it is not necessarily about building smart systems, though there's a component of that.
Mhm.
It's a lot about helping clients avoid noise. I find, and I think this is common with most fractionals, is I find that most people come to me because they think they already know what the solution is, right? They come to me a lot like an agency, which is something I always have to navigate. And they say,
Mhm.
hey, we need to do this thing, right? We need more top of funnel lead gen, or commonly now, as I talk about AI a lot on LinkedIn and places like that, they'll say, hey, we need to be smarter with how we're using AI, and there are a million options, and a lot of them are bad or poorly built or just built on
Right.
top of something simple. So lots of conversations around navigating that and what to avoid, and oftentimes what stalwarts still really matter in the software space in particular.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a crazy, as far as the economy is concerned, it's been a crazy like 4 or 5 years, right? Like
Yeah.
really crazy, real big highs and big lows and big sideways moves. And how is the economy sort of impacting what your clients are prioritizing and willing to put money behind right now?
Yeah, great question. So the big shift I've seen, and keep in mind, a lot of this context is coming from sort of VC-backed
Yeah.
startup, heritage and environment. But we know that a lot of that money's dried up. It's a
Hmm.
lot harder to raise money, and the things you have to do to raise future rounds have changed. So that means that the role of marketing, especially at earlier stage companies, which is where I typically wind up, has shifted a lot. And so the perfect example would be years ago in house, trying to raise Series A from a seed round or go from an A to a B round. That mostly looked like creating tons of momentum, right? You're looking for
Hmm.
product market fit. You don't necessarily have to have it, or didn't so much then. You just needed to show momentum. So if I, as a marketer, am capturing leads that are our ICPs, and they're really showing true engagement and interest in a B2B environment, we're getting a lot of them to become qualified opportunities. Great. We can raise tons of money on that, right? Because the future is forever. The big change I've seen with everything happening in the economy and what that's done with VCs is businesses have to really work to raise money. So A rounds are lower, and they require product market fit, and they require some initial traction, not just more promise. So that means that what businesses have to do in earlier stages is less about lead gen and a lot more about true product market fit. I think there's a lot more more focus on life cycle marketing to make sure that the customers that they are closing are sticking around and are hopefully upselling. And I think that's starting to fall under marketing more and more. Account management teams are smaller or leveraging more automation, so that becomes more of a marketing task. And so I guess the short answer there, Dean, is we're moving from a world where it's all about making things look really big with huge potential into one where businesses have to seem viable and prove that they're viable to raise any money at all. And that shifts early stage marketing big time.
Let me ask you a question. I'm not a fractional CMO, but let me ask you a question as a fractional CMO. You've like, you're past like the 1 year mark now, right? So compared to when you first started being a fractional, and you've been in marketing for a long time, right? Has the process of finding clients changed in the last year, or do you think it's going to be very different in 2025, 2026? Given especially how many more people are like rushing into that field
Yep. I think definitely the process has changed and will
in
continue
the
to
title.
change. My question is it about a changing system and a changing marketplace, or is it
Got it.
about my own sort of knowledge and experience? Because right out the gate, one thing I did is I interviewed tons of other fractionals outside of marketing.
That's a good idea.
It makes perfect sense, right? Because you can
Yeah.
basically cross sell into each other's logos. And one thing I learned is that no one that I talked to was really doing anything reliable for demand gen, right?
Right.
They were everyone's using their phone book, and over
Yeah.
time, you start leveraging referrals if you do good work, right? And that's basically it for most people. It's phone book and referrals. And the people who are great, and I learned this mostly from ops people, the people who are great and have a full book of business and barely had time to talk to me, all productized something,
Hmm.
right? That's how they get in the door. Whether it's something as simple as a podcast, right? Or whether it is a 3 month, I'm a 3 month pilot, I wouldn't recommend, but that's an example you see. I wound up having to productize something as well, which is not really a fractional service, so we can table that unless it's interesting later. But I went from going beating my phone book, hoping for referrals, letting everyone know what I'm doing, to then posting a lot more on LinkedIn, sharing tons of insight,
Right.
building a brand around myself, then building a product that was easily accessible to draw people in, which gives me a little bit of pipeline. So I think looking ahead, I'm hoping to eventually get to a place where I have IP. I have more of a reputation. My product becomes something that I can sell as a higher ticket item or at a
Right.
higher volume. So I think it's about continuing to build yourself as I'm going to say like a personal brand, though that's part of it, but really finding ways to provide value early and fast that then leads to fractional work. Very rarely does someone call you and say, I need a fractional CMO. And as the market gets more and more crowded, some of those calls will come in because there's more awareness about what a fractional is and the value they provide, but also there'll be thousands of people that are waiting for those calls, right? So
Yeah.
the competition's rising. I also think there are a lot of people who call themselves fractionals and they're job hunting almost full time.
Hmm.
So there's also a bit of a weird like category reputation challenge that's going to have to be addressed. And I think that what we'll see there is some smaller communities becoming resources for businesses that want trusted fractionals that are vetted and that kind of thing.
So yeah, that brings up a good point. So let's flip it around, right? And let's think about the clients and like potentially future clients, like those companies. Do you think it's getting easier or harder for them to find the right marketing staffers when they get to the point where they want to hire marketing people?
That's a great question. I don't think it's getting harder to find the right people.
Hmm.
What I'm seeing more of is uh, organizations looking for the wrong resource.
Mm.
So I have a lot of calls where I have to basically refer a potential client to an
Hmm.
agency, for example, because they don't want a fractional leader. They've believe they've identified a problem. They're not open to hearing whether or not that's the actual problem, right?
Right.
Which is really what a fractional should be doing. And so I think it's they. I don't think they struggle to get to the right resource. I think that there's so much knowledge to be found online, and I think this exists in marketing as well as other departments, that orgs are coming to outside resources with an assignment rather than with a question. And that makes it really, really difficult for them to know, for them to get the right help. They
Right.
can find a resource to solve the problem they've identified, but I don't know that they're doing a great job of getting to the right problem.
Um, so you're mainly talking and working with like B2B SaaS, right?
Yep.
But I mean, all of us end up talking to people in multiple industries, right? Do you have any, insights or tips for other marketing folks about what sort of industries you're seeing growth in?
I have tons of calls with home
Yeah,
service businesses.
home service.
Yeah.
You mean like landscapers and lawn guys and pest control, that kind of stuff?
Garage door repair. Yep.
Really?
And I think part of what's going on here is there's this whole there's a Cody Sanchez, I think's her name, right? The buy boring businesses thing.
Hmm.
There's all this stuff in the market about all these boomers wanting to retire. They have to sell their
Hmm.
business, right? This is happening. And so there are some smart people who are building like micro PE plays or are scooping up a couple of these businesses, or maybe even just buying one, right? They want to get out of corporate, right? There's this whole crew of millennials who either got laid off
Right.
or want to break away from corporate. Some of them are becoming fractional whatevers if they have enough expertise. And another group are buying these small businesses, but they don't necessarily have marketing expertise. And so I wind up getting a lot of those calls. Now, part of that could just be sort of my network, right? I'm really tapped
Sure.
into the startup thing. And so those are people that are sort of churning out of that are also people that I know. But I'm having tons of home services calls, which is really, really interesting and such a different thing. I mean,
Right.
if you think about marketing B2B SaaS versus marketing almost like a mom and pop home service business, or maybe
Yeah.
they got 8 trucks, completely different thing. And look, they don't have enough money often to afford a fractional in a traditional
Right.
model. And so then that opens up new models also for
Hmm.
fractional.
All right, so let's talk about that then for a second. You can talk about by the way, I'd never heard the term micro private equity, and here's why it's a fantastic term. I'd never heard it, and I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, a great term.
I don't know if you coined it or not, but that's like chef kiss. That's
I
like,
didn't I saw it somewhere, but I couldn't tell you where. And when I saw it, I was like, that's exactly the
yeah.
word. Yeah.
Okay, so what are some mistakes that companies you see are making still,
Yep.
these days, or new mistakes that
Yeah.
weren't even possible to make before?
The biggest mistake I've seen companies make on the marketing front throughout my entire career is, and it's the same problem I just mentioned. Oh,
Oh,
it is a problem I see a lot. Is um, organizations or leaders in organizations determining a marketing strategy without enough marketing input. Sometimes I would see, and this, let's say an in-house, I have a specific, I'm thinking about a company from many years ago where sales leadership met
mhm,
with the CEO, mapped out go to market, and then rolled that down to marketing. Right. So it's
mm,
ascribing to marketing sort
right.
of what needs to be done without marketing being directly involved. And that org wound up being successful, but it probably took 2 years of spin before marketing got really involved in the GTM. We rolled out ABM and things really started getting rolling. I still see that so much is organizations or leadership feel like they have to know what the problem is before they engage a resource or of any expertise.
Mhm.
Huge problem. Like any outreach with any smart person should be a question rather than a statement, right? It should never be, we need this. It should always be, here's the challenge that we're having. That's the statement. How would you approach solving this challenge, right? That's opening up expertise. That is a constant, that's a problem with all humans, not just organizations.
Right. Yeah.
Stating things instead of asking questions. So I see that as a huge problem. When it comes to maybe something a little bit more specific and in the trenches, I think there's a huge challenge that a lot of businesses are still having, and this may be coming from the sort of tech boom 2.0, which is trying to be everything to everyone still. You'll
Mhm.
hear leadership talk about how much we need to niche down, how much we need to niche down. They might even say, this product is only for healthcare, right? It's B2B in healthcare. We're only going to sell to health plans and hospitals. That's not a niche. That's a massive
Yeah.
market. And especially if you have multiple product lines you're trying to sell. And so I think businesses are still struggling to focus. And I think the businesses that are going to do the best right now are very like vertically integrated, right? They really are super focused. I also think those are the businesses that are raising money right now because it's clear where they're going to make their money. So it makes it impossible to market as well when your ICP is 30 pages long of different people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. If somebody can't put you inside a box in their head very quick, you go in the junk drawer.
Yeah, exactly. And that
Right.
goes both ways, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about, you mentioned outreach there and messaging, and even and earlier a bit about branding, right? Like, what in marketing do you think is sort of underrated and or overlooked right now as far as a thing to do, a tool to use, a tactic or strategy to try for most
Branding.
of your clients?
It's always branding. It's been
Always branding.
it's been branding. I think once we got to a world where it felt like everything was measurable,
Hmm.
all anyone wants is what they can measure directly.
Right. No.
Because it's so easy to turn a dial one direction or the other, especially if you're in an environment where there's a board you have to report to. It's really easy to justify spend when you can show really clear lines and where they're coming from. These ads are doing this, right? It's they just want that. They just want that stuff. Um, Brand does a ton of that,
Yeah.
and it always has. And in a world when marketing wasn't as measurable as it is now, we saw a lot more fun branding things. We saw way more fun commercials, way more fun advertisements.
Yep.
Things were a lot more creative because you needed to stay in top of mind. None of that's changed. The psychology of a buyer hasn't changed. Our ability to track ad clicks and attribute that directly to revenue doesn't mean that the way people buy has changed or our
Yeah.
brains have changed. So I think brand is increasingly important. And now in a world where, like, especially in the States, privacy is coming back. I have a client in Berlin as well where they're
Hmm.
way bigger on
Very
privacy.
different. Yeah.
So that was taught me a lot about the value of brand and getting, you really have to earn things there. You can't just sort of gate stuff. No one's going to give you their info.
Right.
Branding is huge. And I think the other component of that, and we're starting to see a ton of this, especially if you spend time on LinkedIn, is a real return. I think if you want to call it a return, but a real trend of people buying from people. So executives really have to have a personal brand. They really need to be in the forefront. So yes, you have your company brand for sure, especially at a larger business. But so often, especially in a smaller business or a startup, the brand is leadership, right? And it might not be a CEO. You might have a CTO who's posting a ton because you're selling software. But as long as the sort of one of the thought leaders or brand personal brand leaders at your company is connected to the product and the audience that you're primarily selling, that is a huge boon. We're seeing tons of it on LinkedIn, and I think it's just in its infancy.
You know, I came across this podcast a couple weeks ago, and the guest was Rory Sutherland, and like an ad guy from
Mhm.
the UK. And he was asked about like, uh, do you think marketing will ever get to the point where it won't have trouble justifying itself and its ROI? And he said, here's how like he's mostly a brand guy, right?
Mhm.
Here's how like he said here's what team marketing teams miss. He said, in companies where the marketing team is just they're dialed in, right? The marketing is great, it's on point, it's solid, right? Uh, Everyone else in the company gets to play the game of capitalism on easy mode because branding, like sales, can when they cold call, they're kind of recognized. The CEO calls somebody, call gets returned. You see? He said the CEO of Nike could call the CEO of any business in America, no matter what their industry is, and they're going to call him back. Do they make or sell clothes? No, they don't. They don't even know why someone from Nike is calling them, but they're going to call him back because marketing at Nike has been great. I mean, not so much in the last couple of years, but
It's
you know,
about to get fixed, I think.
I think that's about to get fixed with the new CEO, right?
Yeah.
But basically, with if marketing's really good, everyone else gets to play capitalism on easy mode. And if marketing's not so good, everyone has to carry their own backpack.
It's a great point.
Yeah, I'd never really thought about it that way, but he's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's when you think about core marketing strategies that we
Right.
hear about all the time, SEO,
Mm-hmm.
display ads, right? Social, whatever. All that stuff is basically a way of pouring accelerant on a business
Right.
that doesn't have a good enough brand.
Yeah.
Like early stage startups, there's a reason that you wind up overspending on this stuff. No one knows who you are, right? Hopefully, you're not also building a category, but I
Right.
mean, you're competing against the stalwarts, right? All the obvious stuff. But once your brand name is known, you get inbound like crazy.
Yeah.
Your ad budget goes down because when someone sees your brand and you're providing an offer for something they care about, they're going to click on that or go straight to your site. I mean, brand is the game. The rest is just then right place, right time, right? And,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of analytics that can help do that now in a way that we never could 20 years ago. And so, but brand,
Yeah.
you know,
All right. I have a fill in the blank question for you as we wind down. Okay. I like this question because it's really easy for me and much harder for the guest.
great.
Many clients just don't understand.
Marketing attribution.
Mm,
This is one of those this is one of these things where with all the data coming in and dashboarding tools and
hmm.
all of the touch points, and if let's assume that in this example that the organization is really sophisticated, right? They have some great ops people and everything is being tracked pretty appropriately. There's still a conversation in some meeting where an executive or a board member is going, what ad is driving the most revenue, right? And so I'd say, well, we ran this ad. This is what happened. This is the waterfall. It's really well tracked. That's what's driving the most revenue. and then they say, great, let's just run more of those, or let's put more
Right.
budget there. And again, going back to brand, I mean, there's so many more nuanced parts of that story. But because things can be tracked so cleanly now, from a click or an outreach or whatever, a campaign, all the way through to even, let's say, like 2 years later, a
Right.
complicated B2B deal closes, they just think repeat that, repeat that. There's not enough storytelling at that level, at the analytics level, to truly figure out what's going on. And I don't think there's a lot of receptiveness to storytelling because it looks clean. And so you wind up making decisions based on data, but not necessarily interpretation of data. And so that messes up, I think, ultimately attribution.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I heard someone talking about advertising specifically, right? They were talking about like online digital advertising, but is that advertising is fuel. If you don't have the fire going already, all you're doing is dumping a lot of fuel on the ground.
Mhm.
You can spend as much as you want, nothing's ever gonna like catch.
Yeah. I would agree with that in all cases, except for when you are running ads to test something,
Right.
right? Like test the
Mhm.
validity of something, test the interest in
Yeah.
something.
You've got
Uh,
seven possible fires in your mind. You need to figure out which fire someone might actually want to get warm by, and then you pour fuel on it.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Josh. Thank you very much. By this, I love this. Who should be contacting you these days, and how should they get in touch with
That is a nuanced question.
you?
So I'm always happy to talk with, kind of anyone that's looking for fractional work. Though I would say my superpower in marketing is I'm hyper creative. And so I have tons of resources that I can pull in. I'm a great manager of people. So my ideal customer is one that has a strong marketer or marketing team in house. I'm really great at leveraging those resources, helping them grow, ideally to the point where I'm work myself out of a role.
Right.
So if you have a marketing team and you need some senior leadership, that's my perfect place to work. I don't have a ton of room for clients, but I always want to talk to those people.
Yeah.
I also always want to talk to other fractionals just about their life because I'm building some other products to support fractionals. So always open to that. And anyone who wants to talk about consulting for equity is something I'm also highly interested in. So if that fits into your business model, you should reach out to me. You can reach out to me at josh@jawhouse.com, JAWHOUSE. But even better, just find me on LinkedIn. Oh, I realized I missed the L on my on my URL there. It's
Well,
inkton.com, which maybe would be a great content marketing website. But yeah, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So that's a phenomenal place to find me as well.
it's going to be a race right as soon as this episode ends for me and Josh to go to domain and find out if that domain's taken.
That's right.
All right. All right. Josh, this has been great. Thanks very much, Matt. I really appreciated it. And thanks for watching. You're probably watching this on a clip, but thanks for watching the clip. We really appreciate, hundreds of thousands of views now. See ya.